It's Ash from Super Videos back for another video. This is going to be a different type of video than you're used to. In this video, we're going to be looking at the top 5 things we want to see in Last of Us Part 2. With the success of Part 1 and with the many requests that I got to play Part 1, I played and I absolutely loved every second of the gameplay and the story of Part 1, and I cannot wait for Part 2 to be released. Of course, they did release a lot of promotional stuff and also the trailers and some gameplay videos for Part 2. Now, in terms of when Part 2 is going to come out, it might be this year, hopefully it is, but if not, then definitely next year. But in this video, we're going to look at the top 5 things that we as fans would really like to see in Part 2. Now, I've broken this video into 2 sections. In one section, I will only look at the story aspect of the game for Part 2, and in the other, I will look at the gameplay and enhancements to the gameplay itself. So 5 things from the story that I would like to see and 5 things from the gameplay that I would like to see. So with that said, let's start with the story itself, a central storyline. So of course, the storyline that we had in Part 1 was the Ellie being a cure storyline, which was the central storyline for Part 1. There were definitely smaller missions and smaller storylines within that, but pretty early on, the primary or the central storyline was presented to us as being the Ellie having the cure storyline, which was definitely the resolution or the final chapter of the story and how the story kind of ended and how they wrapped everything up. It all led to Ellie and her being a cure storyline. So I hope that we get a similar thing in Part 2. And even though we should have other missions and smaller kind of storylines, there should still be a central storyline that we are following. Having a central storyline is not only good to immerse us into the story and have us feel connected to these characters, but it's also great for the gameplay itself, and it's a great way for us to live these stories through these characters. Revisit the past. So one thing that I am very interested to see is whether they will visit not only some of the past stories, but also some of the locations or characters from the past. And I think this is a great way to throw us back to some of the great things that we enjoyed seeing in Part 1. And it kind of gives us a nostalgic feeling to be able to go back to these old locations, have some of these past storylines come back into play somehow, or even meet up with some of the characters that we've seen in the past who may still be alive. Ellie's own squad. One of the key reasons why I even have this is because of the fact that Ellie is the central character in Part 2. In Part 1, obviously we had Joel being the central character and being the kind of primary character you're controlling and you're living through their stories. In Part 1, what did we have? We had Joel having a squad. Tess, Joel, and some other members who we didn't necessarily meet or get to know too well. But Joel definitely did have his own squad. I think it would be pretty cool, and it would definitely fit the theme of the story looking at Part 1 to have Ellie forming her own squad, much like Joel did in Part 1. Now, not all of these characters have to become main characters or characters that we see all the time, much like what they did with Part 1 and with Joel's squad. But it would be great to show us that Ellie has really grown and she's become a tough and hardened survivor. And to show that she has these kind of connections and she has these people that she calls her squad or her people, or people that she would protect. We've seen a lot of hints in the trailers and the teasers that we've got showing us that perhaps that's exactly where they're going, that Ellie will have her own squad, much like Joel did in Part 1. Return of the Fireflies. Obviously, with Part 2, there is a time jump. We know that because Ellie is a lot older. But me as a fan, I would love to kind of have parts of the main villain group, you could say, from Part 1 pop back into play. They don't have to make a big difference. They don't have to be the primary part of the story, but it would be absolutely cool and interesting to see the Fireflies coming back. Maybe a few of them that are still alive and survived could come back and seek revenge. We could see some even wanting to complete the mission that the original Fireflies from part 1 started. So in a way, this could be a great way to bring back some of the characters from the past or some of the stories from the past that I mentioned, and a great way to explore the past in a way. But like I said, this doesn't even need to be a central part of the story. It could be like 10 minutes of a story to kind of see some of these characters and some of these groups again. This would not only help in us feeling a connection with part 1 and feeling like this is still part of the same storyline, but also for us to have a nostalgic feeling, like I mentioned previously. Character development of side characters. I hope, much like part 1, they do explore the stories and the pasts of some of these side characters, and I hope that they flesh out some of these side characters like they did in part 1. And I hope that it's not just a few characters who get a lot of character development, while others who may be very, very interesting characters not getting any stories or development. So I hope they have a balance where we have some of these main characters being developed, but also at the same time some of these side characters being developed as well, and for us to learn a little bit more about some of these side characters. So we talked about the story. Now let's jump into the gameplay. The first thing that I think is absolutely necessary and very important is some sort of free play. And what do I mean by that? Free play in a way where you have a little bit of time to explore this world as this character. And it's not like you're necessarily just doing a mission. And a situation where you walk around, you explore the locations around you, and in a way you write your own story. That would be extremely important, I think, to really feel like you're immersed into this world even more than you were in part 1. Next, I have free play interactions. So following up with what I said about exploring the world, it would also be extremely important to interact and to walk around, have conversations with these random people that are in this world. You don't necessarily always have to only speak to people that are part of your story and part of the missions that you're trying to complete. You could walk around, talk to people, and to have a way to form your own friendships or even relationships in the story. Next, which is another very, very important one, is alternate story. I think it would be extremely powerful to have a scenario where you could write your own story, like I said before, but in a way where it actually matters, in a way where it impacts what happens to you in the storyline. So alternative story paths is what I'm trying to get at. This increases the replay value of the game. So you could play it once and then you could play it again and have a different story, have a different experience through the story even. It's kind of like what they do in Telltale's games, like Telltale's The Walking Dead. In a way, you could take that concept and apply it to a game that has great graphics and a great storyline as well. Obviously, this means that they do have to think a lot more and in depth about various different branches in the story, but at the same time, I think it would be absolutely interesting and great. At this point, I don't think they are doing this. If they were, it would have come out by now. But I think that if there's a part 3, I hope they do something like this, because I think these types of games that have great stories miss something, which is the alternate storylines and the alternate story paths, like I said. Next, control Joel. So play as Joel again. As much as we all love to play as Ellie, as the primary character, especially now that she's a hardened and a tough survivor, we won't mind playing as Joel again, because Joel introduced us to this world. So in a way, I would love to have the chance to play as Joel, maybe one final time. Depends on where his story goes and whether he's even alive. But I think it would be extremely cool for us to play as Joel again and to experience the story in part 2 as Joel for a part of the story. And last but not least, I have real life actions. This is something that they have already hinted at and kind of shown us in the trailers and the teasers. And what do I mean by real life actions? Real life actions include actions like hiding under a car, crafting your own weapons, using humans as shields, and things along those lines. These would not only make the gameplay feel more genuine and more close to real life, but also they help because they get you to think out of the box. They get you to use some of these strategies to be able to survive. And it's not quite as simple as just saying hide behind this wall or duck down to avoid the enemy or to get past the zombies or things like that. So that's another one that I think is absolutely important. And it seems like they are definitely doing this in part 2, which I absolutely love. But that's basically my top 5 list of things I would like to see, and I hope that fans would like to see in part 2 as well. But I want to know everyone's thoughts and opinions. What do you want to see in part 2 of Last of Us? Let me know in the comment section below. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video. If you like what you see, press like, subscribe for more content, and press the bell button to receive notifications for daily uploads.